Hi, this problem demonstration video deals with the relationships between the financial statements. And if you take a look at your chapter summary notes on page 7, you'll see a nice summary of the three financial statements that we learned and the formulas. So we've got the income statement, which we must do first. Revenues minus expenses equals net income. If the revenues are greater, it's a net income. If the expenses are greater than the revenues, it's a net loss. Then that net income amount goes on the next statement, the statement of retained earnings, which is the beginning balance of retained earnings. In other words, all the profits that the company has kept, plus the profits or net income for this period, minus the profits that the company has given to its stockholders as dividends, equals the ending retained earnings balance. And then finally the balance sheet. Assets equals liabilities plus stockholders' equity. But please underneath that write that the stockholders' equity is two parts. Common stock, which represents the initial investment of the stockholders. The stockholders give the corporation money in exchange for common stock. And then retained earnings, which is carried down from the statement of retained earnings. It's the ending balance, and that represents all the profits the company has earned to date, less what they've given away as dividends to their stockholders. Now we can use these formulas to do some problems. So in your worksheet, you should have this problem, M1-13. And in this problem, we're to find the missing items. So for Apple, we have to find items A, B, and C. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the formulas right from the handout. So to calculate net income, we'll take revenues, subtract expenses. And I've started the first one for us here. Let me zoom out a bit. Okay. So total revenues are $171. Total expenses are $122. We subtract to get net income of $49. To find our next item, end of the year retained earnings, we use our retained earnings statement formula. And I've reproduced it here. Beginning retained earnings, which is 104, plus the net income we just calculated, the earnings for this year, minus the dividends, and there are 0. So 104 plus 49 equals 153. And finally, in item C, they want us to calculate total assets. So we take a look at our balance sheet, and our formula is assets equal liabilities plus stockholders' equity. So I've put that formula there, and let's fill it in. Liabilities are 83, and there is no stockholders' equity total, but we know stockholders' equity has two parts, right? Common stock and retained earnings. Just remember to use the ending retained earnings balance. So the common stock is 20. The retained earnings balance we just calculated was 153. So the total stockholders' equity is 173. 83 in liabilities plus 173 in stockholders' equity makes 256. So if you're doing this in Connect, you would simply put 49 in the little space for A, you would put 153 in the space for B, and you would put 256 in the space for C. If we were to do Google, we would do the same thing. Revenues, this case, of 50. Expenses of 34. We subtract to find our net income, and that's 16. Then we have to find our retained earnings at the end of the year, so we take our beginning of the year retained earnings of 38. We will bring down our net income of 16 and subtract dividends of 0. So our ending retained earnings balance is 54. Now to calculate our total assets on the balance sheet, we would find our liabilities. They are 22. And we'd have to add in our stockholders' equity. It's in two parts. There's the common stock, 23. And retained earnings, we just calculated that. The ending balance of retained earnings is 54. So stockholders' equity in total is 77. 77 plus 22 equals 99 in assets. And our last one, Intel Corporation. Our revenues are 55. Our expenses are 44. So that leaves a net income of 11. Our retained earnings at the beginning of the year are $33. We're going to add in the earnings for this period. Remember, earnings and profit and net income all mean the same thing. So our earnings or profit or net income from this period, $11. And this time we have dividends that we have to subtract, 5. So our total ending retained earnings balance is 39. Now to figure out our total assets, we would take our liabilities, which is 42, and we'll add in our common stock of 22 plus our ending retained earnings balance of 39. So our liabilities plus our stockholders' equity equals 103. And so this is just another way of asking you to find out the same type of things you'd find out when you're preparing the financial statements, but it reinforces the relationships between the three financial statements. Now let's take a look at a problem that's similar, but again, it's a slightly different presentation. E1-8. It asks you to find the missing or empty boxes here as well. But if we look at what information is across the top here, what we have is the income statement formula here. Revenues minus expenses equals net income. And then, let me draw a line between these two here. On this side, the right side, we've got the accounting equation. Assets equal liabilities plus stockholders' equity. So again, we can just use our calculations. 110,000 minus 82,000 gives us net income of 28,000. Total assets of 150 equals 70 plus something. Well, the stockholders' equity must be 80,000 because 80 plus 70 equals 150. So we subtracted to find this answer, to find the missing one. In independent case B, they do not give us total revenues. But if we know that something minus 80 equals 12, we can add backwards and get 92. For our accounting equation here, or balance sheet equation, $112,000 in total assets equals something plus 70. To find that something, we can subtract. 112,000 minus 70 equals 42,000. Now, if it's easier for you to do this vertically, you can always do this vertically. Set up the income statement formula as revenues minus expenses equals net income, and that might be easier for you to do vertically. Okay, here we have in C 80,000 in revenues minus 86,000 in expenses? Well, in this case, since the expenses are greater than the revenues, we have a net loss. When you enter this into Connect, you can put minus 6,000, and then the computer will change it to 6,000 in parentheses. That's indicative of a loss. When we see parentheses around an amount, that indicates that it's a loss. Here we have to find our stockholders' equity. 104,000 equals 26,000 plus some other figure, and we can subtract to find that. 104,000 minus 26,000 would be 78,000. In case D, 50,000 in revenue minus the expenses equals net income of 20,000. So what did you subtract from 50,000 to get to 20? That would be 30,000. And then for our total assets, assets equal liabilities plus stockholders' equity, so 22,000 plus 77,000 equals 99,000. And in our last case, they do not give us total revenues, but we know revenues minus expenses equals a net income or loss. In this case, it's a net loss. Well, think about what a net loss means. A net loss means that the expenses were greater than the revenues by 6,000. Well, that means that the revenues would be 75,000. There's 6,000 less than the expenses. And here we have to find total assets again. Liabilities plus stockholders' equity gives us our assets. So 73,000 plus 28,000 equals 101,000. So again, you can look at page 7 of our notes, and it's got those formulas right there for you. You can also find them on the financial statement template. I apologize, the financial statement example document that you printed out. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a great day.